11th edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source, and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture. We're glad you're here on Back Roads of Illinois. Well, folk, there are one death by H5N1 bird flu in Mexico. It is the first death of bird flu from poultry farm in Mexico. The health minister of Mexico, he said that there is many finding case of this death in Mexico. We were going to talk about the commodities markets with Sherman Newlin and the weather in the Midwest with Michael Clark from BMWX in Indianapolis. We were looking into the summer season. Some farmers are getting done with the planting season in the Midwest and Central Illinois, which was very wet season in Central Illinois near Peoria between Bloomington. Soybean has been emerged from the ground and the corn as well. I interviewed with Josh Batten from Farm Progress for political editor and Jonathan Koppas from the University of Illinois in Urbana and Champaign. Jonathan said that the Farm Bill has a lot of weeds on the Farm Bill for the Agricultural Committee in the House. You can listen to it for full interview on Back Roads of Illinois on YouTube channel. I apologize to miss the show for last Friday. However, we need just walking away from daily show. Reminder, mental health is pretty important for us, especially those in agricultural industry. Do you want help? Text to 988 Crisis Hotline. This is your agricultural news and markets update on Back Roads of Illinois. I mentioned before on the top of the show is a death in Mexico over H5N1 for Friday morning. One of the workers are passed away from the bird flu in poultry farm in Mexico. The health minister that they are investigating for this case for this moment. The World Pork Expo in Des Moines, Iowa. It wasn't held in Iowa, but there is some concerns about biosecurity. Follow along with high avian path influenza in cattle and dairy herd in Kansas and Michigan. This week is for the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report on this Friday at 11 o'clock Central Time from the Department of Agricultural. This time is for your agricultural commodity markets update. Corn futures finished in up 7 to 8 cents. Soybean futures finished in down 2 to 4 cents. Wheat futures finished in up 3 to 4 cents. Now that we are going to talk about the livestock market for today on this morning. Cattle futures finished in down 2 to 3 cents per weight. Feeder cattle finished in down 2 to 3 cents. Lean hogs finished in down 2 to 4 cents per weight. Texas crude oil finished in up 2 to 9 per barrel. Dow Jones finished in up 2 points. We were coming back with our guest with Sherman Newlin from Risk Management. And we were going to listen about forgive diseases for swings production from National Pork Producer. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. I'm joining with Sherman Newlin. He is part of Risk Management Consulting in Southern Illinois. Otherwise, welcome to the show. How are you, Sherman? I am glad to have you on the show.
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for asking me to be here. We've been, like I said, I farm as well as I do the consulting and brokerage business. I've done that for quite a few years, but I've farmed all my life. Uh, but we're doing well. We got all the crops planted finally. Took us about 6 weeks, but we got everything done.
Great to hear that. Let's start with our conversation about the grain trading and the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report from the Department of Agriculture. Start with the trading on the markets from last week. What's happening in there?
Yeah, I mean we had a really good day last Thursday. We had a big up move in corn and soybeans, but we really haven't followed through this week. Wheat though had been quite down quite a few days in a row, roughly about 10 days, I believe. But then today we had a nice outside day reversal higher in the wheat market, and that was brought on by several different things. I think one was an oversold condition in the wheat. And then we had some more news out of the Russian wheat crop out there that they said today that maybe some of their crop is hurt, maybe a little bit worse than what they thought. So I think that was part of the impetus for the market to rebound today. Corn and soybeans were lower. We tried to move higher today, but again, we do have the WASDE report tomorrow. I think we were lower on in anticipation of that. Most in the trade are looking for a bigger carry out in soybeans, up to maybe 450 million bushels is the guesstimate, and the soy and corn maybe a little bit tighter for U.S. stocks. The numbers I think they're going to be looking at as much as anything are the South American numbers. We need to see, if USDA lowers their numbers as much as where CONAB and some of the other forecasters down there are projecting the numbers to be, because they're roughly off about 10 million metric ton. Nobody really thinks USDA will lower them that much, but we do need to see a move in that direction as well. The Argentine crop, the corn crop seems to be coming in smaller, maybe about half of what they were thinking. So that could be supportive to the corn crop, once we see what.
I saw the beans markets are mixed bag for today. Live cattle finished an up 2 to 3 cents higher yesterday's spike in the bird flu.
Yes, cattle were mixed today. They'd been up some the last few days, had a nice rebound yesterday, same as feeder cattle, but they kind of took some of that back off today. Early on, like I said, the trade was higher or lower, I'm sorry, because of the little bit higher corn market. But we also had a lower stock market today. We've got some numbers coming out this week on inflation. And sometimes when the stock market goes down, that weighs on the cattle market. We do know, cash has been roughly steady this week, it seems to be, but the weights have been heavy in the cattle market. So even though maybe we're not killing as many head as we have in the past, but the weights have been quite a bit heavier, so we're making up for it there. And with the inflation talk, consumers are starting to maybe shy away from buying beef as much as maybe they would typically, because you go to a fast food place, it seems to be a lot higher, more expensive to buy stuff. So I think some of the demand could be slowing in the cattle market, and that does make a guy a little bit nervous, even though, overall numbers are tighter. But the demand could really start to slow down if we don't get something done about this inflation.
How is in southern Illinois for corn planting in I-57 corridor near Kentucky border and Indiana?
Wrapping up, we finished probably last week. We had to replant some soybeans. Corn planting got done for us probably a week to 10 days ago. thereabouts. But we started in the middle of April, something that, our usually takes us maybe 2 or 3 weeks to plant. Took us 6 weeks to get everything planted this year because of all the rain we had early on. So some guys are still planting, but most of the crop is starting to get put in the ground around here right now. We had a very, very wet spring. Once we got into April, March was really dry. We thought everything was going to go in quickly, but that quickly changed as we started to get a lot of rain in April and May and just kind of, pushed everything back a little bit. So one good thing about it is at least our corn crop is spread out. If we have a lot of weather, bad weather, hot, dry weather during pollination, we've got the corn crop spread out, so maybe it all won't get hit at the same time.
Hmm. Hmm. Do you guys have a lot of weeds for right now alongside with the weather conditions in southern Illinois?
Yes, we've had a lot of weeds, with the weather. I mean, some of the chemicals didn't work near as well, so we've had to kind of respray some of the soybeans twice. I've noticed some guys that sprayed early on some burn down and didn't have their crops planted that they've had to go back in and respray again. So that's been something that's been, you guys have to take a look at as well. Wheat cutting, though, is getting to start around here. Some of the guys started here a couple of days ago, and with this heat and dryness, it looks like it'll really start to pick up. And I will say the wheat that's out there looks pretty good. We don't have any wheat this year. This is the first year we haven't planted wheat in probably 13 years or so, but we didn't plant any. But the wheat that's around here does look really good.
Sherman, do you have any concerns about the wheat markets in Russia? Could you explain to our listeners about this issue?
Do I have any concerns? Well, the market had some concerns early on, as you saw about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. The market shot up really, really fast and abruptly on the news of the frost and the dry weather that they had out there in Russia. Again, I think that was part of the reason we bounced today because there was some confirmation from Russia that maybe their crop was hurt a little bit worse. I'm not overly concerned about it so much, because we're going to have a big crop here in the U.S. It looks like. We'll need to see some business come from that, to drive up our prices. If it's going to happen. Yeah, and also Turkey delayed some of their imports, and they import roughly 2 to 2.5 million metric ton of Russian wheat, but they've got a good crop as well. So as far as supply side goes, no, I'm not really overly concerned about it right at the moment. Yes, the wheat harvest is starting to pick up around here and across and out west as well. I think the guys in Kansas have a really good crop coming on. So we'll see how that goes. I know the spring wheat planting is getting wrapped up. They've got plenty of moisture up in those areas in the northern plains for this new crop wheat. So I think overall we're going to have a bigger wheat crop as far as production goes this year than we have in the past.
What is your sources for Brazil's soybean production from Canva?
The coming out numbers, are coming in a little bit lower. Obviously, I think they're going to put out some new numbers on Thursday. The range of estimates for the WASDE report, are the trade average guess for Brazil is going to be 120 to 121 on corn. The Brazil beans are going to be in that 151 area on their production. Argentine beans are 49.83 average trade estimate, and Argentine corn is 50.87 for their production. So that's all those numbers are lower than what USDA said in April by a few million metric ton pretty much across the board. So we'll see, if they come in line If they lower it more closer to what CONAB is, which they're, like I said, they're a little bit, quite a bit lower than where USDA is. Um, is that a big deal? We'll have to see. We had a couple of flash sales of soybeans, had one today of 104,000 metric ton of old crop beans to China. And that was kind of interesting. They typically don't buy a whole lot right now. But the other concerning thing is we have not booked any new crop soybeans to China yet. And that is, something the trade is definitely looking at that. Will they come in and start buying some new crop soybeans like they typically do? Or will they push it out farther, try to just keep buying more beans from Brazil? But I think a lot of that will depend on how we end up with the size of the crop in Brazil. If we can get a handle on that. I know there's quite a few reductions. They've had some flooding in some of the areas that took out a lot of soybeans. So, we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. And then if we can get some more sales to China, which would help our prices out right now.
I agree with you. There is a death by H5N1, which is bird flu in Mexico. We should be concerned about it or some other things. How could handle the cattle markets for right now?
That's been around a few times. I think that's kind of been played out in the market already as far as the bird flu. I mean, initially we had some negative reactions to that, but the market has since recovered. And unless something gets a lot worse, I don't know if you're going to see no, much more reaction from that. But like I said, the cattle market is still at pretty lofty levels. I am concerned that, maybe the market could sell off going forward. One, because of how the price of high beef in the grocery stores, and what maybe the economy may be looking like going forward, as we work to try and get this inflation down. So.
Do you have any final thoughts about these commodity prices and Brazil's agricultural agency, the weather?
Uh, I I know as farmers and producers, we'd like for this market to rally some more so we could get some better pricing. And if we can get the market to rally, I mean, historically, we usually take out the December corn or the spring insurance price by about 115%. We've done that for the last 23 years, which would give us a price of roughly 515 on the December futures. But I think the way things are looking, we're going to get a weather pop maybe from this forecast that's coming down the road, the very hot and very dry end of June and start of July. And I think we need to, as producers, use these rallies to get some new crop stuff, corn and soybeans priced, because we also have to be concerned about the end of June acreage report. I think we could also see a few smaller corn acres, which could help support us, but that would also equate to probably a few more bean acres. So it's going to be, the things that's going to make us rally are probably going to be weather. And if those don't last long, so producers should probably be having their orders in, and, so we can lock in some profits, hopefully.
It's pretty interesting year for this year in the livestock markets, especially in the grains and the weather.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the potential for profit is there, but it may not last long. So, as producers, we're going to have to take advantage of that and use everything we can in our toolbox, whether that's hedge to arrives, options, or, flat out cash contracts and forward sales. But, because if we do end up with a 181 or higher yield, or a bigger bean yield, our stocks are going to grow, And, then we got to contend with South America next year, putting in a big crop as well. So our prices later on down the road could be a lot lower. So that's just something we're going to have to watch and try and be more proactive. I think farmers have been a little bit back on their heels about as making new crop sales. I think, we need to be a little bit more proactive now because chances of $5.50 to $6 corn don't seem feasible right now, or, $13, $14 beans at the moment. So, and that's what we've had the last few years. And that's probably not going to happen now.
Thanks, Sherman. This is Sherman Newlin from Risk Management Consulting Firm. We were coming back with Michael Clark from BMWX from National Pork Producer.
I think in a nutshell, we need to, as a category, as an industry, we need to win more households, more consumers, and more occasions. And part of our strategy, frankly, is to focus on growing markets. And the multicultural segment is clearly a growing market for us. When you think about the affinity that these consumers have, Hispanics, African American, and Asian for pork, that affinity is unmatched. So if we want to grow consumption and we want to create long-term demand, then multicultural consumers must be part of our strategy.
Jose de Jesus from Multiple Culture for National Pork Producer Council. The pork is fast growing and the consumption of the markets for the hogs production.
We're focused on fresh pork in this one and really finding people in those key markets like Miami, Atlanta, Chicago, LA, New York, etc. Big markets where we know that most of the pork is being sold at. So this idea of driving consumers to those markets with a very strategic effort, call to action to purchase pork in some of those retailers, because we know retailers like Kroger, retailers like Walmart sell a lot of pork. So targeting those consumers with specific ads to drive consumers to buy more pork.
The demand for the hogs markets is finding a major markets in Chicago, Atlanta, Miami, Los Angeles. The demand is higher for Hispanic, African American, Asian.
We were in market in Q1 of this year, Q4 last year as well. And looking at the Hispanic market alone this quarter, we see more than a 30-to-1 return on ad spend. So clearly that return shows that we're maximizing producer investment, and we want to continue to do that into 2024 and beyond.
Jose said that we were seeing the fourth quarter is higher at the Hispanic markets in the United States. Learn more at porkcheckoff.com. Thanks to Chad Smith from National Farm Broadcasters Association in Platte, Missouri. I'm sorry to mention that we don't have Michael Clark from BMWX. He canceled it off for today. I am wondering that the weather was perfect for this spring. Farmers need some engaged in the weather forecast for this summer. Okay, we were talking with Bill Rose for the Markets Club podcast and Brady Hawk from Advanced Trading. We were coming back with our last segment.